We are back. New York City Baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The co-hosts of the show are Martin Rose, originally from Brooklyn, then Jackson Heights, then Florida, first Staten Island, then Florida, Robert Deininger, who is a New Jerseyite. How are you guys?
Good, Ralph.
Good. Everything well?
Very good. Yep.
Good.
Dodging the raindrops today.
That's what new resident, Wayne Unger, new Florida resident, just moved from Staten Island. And I asked him that on the phone earlier today. How's the weather? And he says apparently at 3:30, 4 o'clock every day in Florida, it rains. It rains a little, and he's no longer in shock. It in a way, it kind of cools things down, doesn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, but it passes so quickly. The sun comes back out. Like today here in Jacksonville, it rained 3 different times. I mean, just a few minutes at a time, comes and goes. That's the summer here. Yep.
How is the weather in New Jersey, Robert? And then we're going to have an introduction of one of my favorite guests of all time. Robert, you doing okay?
Actually, yeah, it downpoured until about noontime here, and it turned out to be a nice, cool day.
Sometimes in one day you can get a gamut of a lot of different weather patterns in this country. Alameda, California, kind of nice. Summery, 76 today. Right across the bay from San Francisco at the 420 studio down by the Lagoon. Our guest from, Gene, you're from New York originally. Gene
Hutmaker. 5 miles from New York in North Jersey.
North Jersey, but you grew up with a New York influence. And
Brooklyn, New York, and Yankees.
Yeah. I have your book. It's the Yankee Hater's Guide. What's the exact title?
Banned in the Bronx, the Yankee Hater Memoirs, 1953 to 2005.
Wow. And the way I look at it, every time you come on, I realize that the book is more of a tribute to the Yankees than it is anything else. Marty and I go way back in years to the 50s when we grew up in New York. Marty, you're kind of neutral. You liked all 3 teams, 4 teams eventually. Am I right, Marty?
Well, I didn't hate any particular team. I mean, my first recollection of baseball, I think, was around the 54 series because my dad was a Giants fan, and I remember watching with him on the old black and white TV, and I remember Dusty Rhodes. I remember that. And, I was born in Brooklyn. My mom's family was from Brooklyn. So, 55, it was wonderful, great, about time, fantastic. So, those earlier years when the Yankees were so dominant, when they won, 5 straight World Series, I think?
49 to 53.
Yeah, back then, I don't, have any recollection of that. But, later on, obviously, they were still great, through the later 50s also and the early 60s. So, but, after the Dodgers and the Giants left, that was all we had for a little bit. So, I never really disliked any particular team. No, I didn't. And
yeah, that's contrary to most fans that were New Yorkers at the time. you pick a team, Yankees, Giants, Dodgers, and you automatically argue against the other two teams with whomever it is that you're talking to, and you tend to make friends readily with those who root for the same team. But that was Marty Rose, who was a friend of everybody. Everybody loved Mert, and it's very cool having you as a friend all these years. Did you, Gene, ever ever love the Yankees as a kid? I know you were Cardinal.
My passion was, there were three things that I hated as a kid of the 50s. The swastika, the hammer and sickle from Moscow, and the interlocking NY out of the Bronx. Now, I understood that the first two were trying to do in the American way of life, whereas the last one was trying to do in the American League.
Okay. Well,
I grew up in a Yankee hating house, so it was kind of hard not to. And at that time, the McCarthy hearings were going on, and everyone in my house hated the commies, and they hated the Yankees. So I equated it for something to hate. And the saying was, in 1953, rooting for the Yankees was like rooting for United States Steel.
Safe investment on one side, very little risk. Was there a time, though, with all your hatred, where you had to admire the players? That was absolutely different from hating, and in quote, because it wasn't hatred with you hate a baseball team. It was hatred to hate the Nazis. It was hatred to hate the commies. That's hate, good old-fashioned hatred. But you know what? It was a very thin line. And for a true baseball fan, Marty, I don't know if you remember a fella who lived across the street from me. His name was Neil Silver. Remember Neil?
Yes.
He was a Dodger fan, and he had older brothers, and they were Dodger fans. And his brothers would educate him on arguing Giants versus Dodgers. And I remember it was 1955, and I remember using the expression, Jackie Robinson is all washed up. And Neil said to me, he may be washed up, but he's better now than you'll ever be in your whole lifetime. And he was quite right, I might add. But we got to be orators. We got to be debaters. We could take the Mickey, Willie argument, and we could take it all the way down the tube. Both sides. We could argue all day and all night. How did you argue Mickey against Willie, Gene?
Well, I always my sister was a Willie Mays fanatic. My guy was Stan the Man, but she was a Willie Mays fanatic. And the thing about Mays, I think he was more, you knew he was going to play every day. With Mickey, with his injuries and so forth, you didn't know if he was going to play all that much. And just looking at the stats and MVPs, and it's judgmental by a lot of the voters, but Mantle could have won 8 MVPs. I know Mays could have won a bunch too, but Mantle could have won 8 MVPs. So,
yeah, well.
But I mean, the leagues were separate.
MVP, they generally judge it on the most valuable player, of course, of your own team.
Right.
And look at his teammates. I mean, if you want to talk about, all the way from Whitey Ford to Yogi Berra to Maris down the line to, I think, the all-time most valuable player when the three of us, not to exclude you, Robert, you were a mere twinkle in your father's eye at this time, but in the 50s and early 60s, very early 60s, there was Gil McDougall, and I grew up a Giant fan. Don't really remember run per se in 1951 in the World Series. He hit a grand slam to really bury the Giants. And whatever it was, I was a Giant fan, but I thought Gil McDougall was terrific. And he was a guy who was the regular shortstop on a pennant-winning World Series championship team, regular third baseman on another pennant-winning World Championship team. That was in 51. And a regular second baseman on another World Series championship team. Incredibly versatile and pretty good hitter, and a New York guy. Later went on to coach at Fordham in the Bronx, and died much too early, Gil McDougall.
He lived in the next town for me. He lived in Nutley, New Jersey.
Pardon me?
He lived in Nutley, New Jersey, the next town to me.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't a native New Yorker. He was a Jersey guy.
When he was with the Yankees, he lived in Nutley, and he had a son that was a basketball star at Montclair State.
Oh, did not know that.
And what happened with him was Herb Score. His desire kind of waned after he hit Herb Score in the eye with the bat. I don't know why. It wasn't his fault. I mean, but his desire kind of waned after he hit Score with the line drive.
Yeah, he retired at the end of that year. He retired young. And he wasn't the only infielder that retired young on the Yankees. That was terrific. Bobby Richardson retired young, Tony Kubek, and that obviously led to the Horace Clarke years. But losing Gil McDougall for that reason, he said that it did, like you put it, took the heart out of his game. And I think I heard that game on the radio, if I'm not mistaken. But that was horrible. I mean, line drive right back at him. And I remember pictures in the paper the next day. It was Tony Conigliaro-like pictures of him in the hospital with his eyes swollen shut and black-eyed, discolored. And ironically, that ruined both their careers. Conigliaro, too. Who was your favorite player, Mert, outside of Mick on the Yankees?
In those years?
Yeah.
Outside of Mick, I don't know. Probably Yogi, just because of the kind of character he was.
Okay.
He was always being quoted, and he's still being quoted to this day. People come, the word yogiism came from him, and I think he was underrated as a player. He was MVP how many times? Three times. Did he win three?
Yeah. Two-time runner-up.
Yes. Okay. And
3 wins.
So, he was. I enjoyed watching him play, and he even played the outfield. Toward the end there when Elston Howard was catching, he played anywhere.
Yeah, he was there with Mazeroski's home run, the left fielder.
Yep.
Mazeroski home run. He was the left fielder to watch the ball go over.
That's right. Remember that number 8? Could see it very clearly with the back as he's looking over the wall.
One of my great moments.
I can imagine it was. One of Casey's mistakes in 1960 that in the World Series that probably led to his firing, because generally in the late innings, what Casey would do, Kubek was the shortstop, and Berra the left fielder, and generally when they had a lead, he would take out Kubek, put him in left field, and switch him to left field, and take out Berra and put Joe DeMaestri at short. He didn't do that this time. The lead went back and forth 3 or 4 times in that game. He left Kubek in there. DeMaestri hits a ground ball, hits through no fault of Kubek, hits a pebble, hits him in the neck, leads to the downfall of it all. And whatever you say, whatever it is, even if the ball is hitting the exact same spot, the ball doesn't hit the pebble with, or it comes off differently with DeMaestri in there, and things change. But Yogi played a lot of left field and wasn't started out in right before he was switched to catcher, and Bill Dickey taught him learned them all he knew. There was an expression, another Yogiism, that was probably the first one. And Joe Garagiola, he gave way to that also, a boyhood friend of Yogi's. That's a good guy to root for. Robert, who did your dad root for? Your dad was a Mickey guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, huge Mickey Mantle fan. Also an Elston Howard fan.
Whoa. Those are words that Weighted Donuts host Wayne Unger really likes to hear. Wayne has a show on this network that he named Weighted Donuts after the memory of Elston Howard, who invented those metal weights that batters would put on the end of the bat when they were warming up. They'd swing a weighted bat. And Yogi, or Elston Howard, invented that and helped a lot of batters along the way. What's your, did you go to old timers games when you were a kid, Robert?
No, I wish.
Okay.
I was living in Florida when I was young.
I was in camp during old timers days most years. Did you go, Marty?
Back in those days, no, not too many. Not too many. I actually went to one about 3 years ago, believe it or not, because I hadn't been to the new stadium yet. And it was kind of cool, very enjoyable. But it was always fun to watch them on TV. And of course, the best part was always the introductions. See who got the loudest introduction and all that business with DiMaggio, and he had to be the last one and all that. That was great stuff. Real drama,
And to you, Marty, Gene, and Robert, and everybody out there, if you want to see something that's high drama, go to YouTube, and there's a Mickey Mantle retirement day in '69 when they presented him with a plaque, retired his number, and every old Yankee of our youth, Mert, was there. Woodling and Berra and for everybody came out. They went to their positions. They announced that they brought him out. And the love for Mantle was exhibited by like 14 minutes of nonstop cheering. They couldn't stop it. They were all standing there waiting for the crowd to die down. It was embarrassing for Mantle. It was a humble guy, really.
He was a hero of a generation. He really was.
Right. But first, Gene will attest that at first Mantle was hated in New York. It took he appeared to be an underachiever. He wouldn't come back on rehab, wouldn't rehab his body well. Casey said negative things about him in the press.
Flowers changed all that for him.
Yes.
They picked on Maris, and they cheered Mantle once Maris went for the record.
You're absolutely right. And Maris became the anti-hero, or Mantle became the anti-hero at that point. Or unless I have that wrong. I'm not good with heroes. Yogis or hoagies are good, but I don't know from heroes. Or anti-heroes. Yes, Maris changed everything. And people forget Maris was MVP the year before he went for the home run record. And he beat Mantle out for that. I don't even remember if Mantle was a candidate.
He beat him both times by like about 2 votes.
Oh, okay.
Mantle should have probably been the MVP both times. And if Maris hit 59 homers, if he didn't get to 61, it would have probably been Mantle.
Interesting, too, because MVP, All-Star voting, Hall of Fame voting, it's always been the New York press that leads the way, and it's always been an excuse for those people that weren't voted in. Well, we weren't popular in New York, out-of-town team, but you had 2 players, one of whom was clearly Maris, clearly the least of let's put it this way, the least fan-friendly ball player of the 2. And yet it didn't affect the press's voting for the MVP. And I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Was Mantle more popular because of the slight for MVP, or was he slighted for MVP even though he was more popular? But that's always very subjective, and those votes. But Maris was a terrific ball player and went on to St. Louis after he hurt his wrist. The Yankees lied to him. They told him it wasn't broken. They said, come on back. He comes back, hurts it more, and then goes to St. Louis and had some very, very productive years as the kind of player that he was most comfortable being in, a role player, if you will. Wasn't a role player like a utility player, but that team with Brock and your team. Tell us about that team, Gene.
Yeah, well, when he went to St. Louis, because he was going to quit, and they traded him for Charlie Smith, who also got traded for my guy Ken Boyer. But anyway, when Maris went to St. Louis, he finally became a Jolly Roger.
Right.
But
yes.
Well, they had that was the remnants of the '64 team. Of course, my guy Boyer was already off it, but they had Shannon, Javier. Matt Maxwell was one of the drawbacks. At real good defensive, but with the plate. And McCarver was one of the top catchers. And then actually right. Brock and Flood, who tossed away a potential Hall of Fame career by his principal. So they were pretty good, and they had that pitching. When you had Bob Gibson, and then you had Bryles, and for 1 year they had Steve Carlton. So they had a real nice team.
Absolutely. And ironically, you know who helped him? Gene knows. Marty does too, I'm sure. Helped that pitching staff quite a bit was Roger the Dodger Craig, who came from the Mets via the Dodgers, and really contributed mightily in that bullpen. They didn't need much bullpen. They would, and you mentioned Julian, or didn't mention Julian Javier solidified that infield. Javier and Maxwell were terrific. As well as
then they had Cha-Cha Cepeda at first.
Yes. And after a while, boy, they got Joe Torre and made the best of him. They put him at third base, and a slow-footed Joe Torre hits .363. I think that was a little later on.
In 71.
On the road. You hit on something. You said your man was Ken Boyer. we grew up in New York. Clete Boyer was absolutely terrific. I'll ask you first, Marty, memories of Clete Boyer, and then I'm going to ask Gene to compare the two. Obviously, Ken was the superior hitter, but defensively, was Ken anywhere near as good as Clete defensively? But first, Marty, Clete Boyer memories.
Yeah, he was at the time, the best I had seen at that point. And I think we mentioned in a previous show that the only other guy that was maybe close to him in the Yankees that we've seen was Greg Nettles, But
right.
I think Clete Boyer was even better than Greg Nettles as I recall. They were both really good, but Clete Boyer was terrific, definitely.
Well, Ken Boyer's fielding was underrated, given that he was such a good hitter. Am I correct?
He did win 5 Gold Gloves.
Kenny did?
Yeah, Ken Boyer won 5 Gold Gloves.
Oh, whoa. Did not know that.
But Clete was
then let me ask you about the Ken Boyer-Ron Santo comparison. Santo ends up making the Hall. I thought growing up that Boyer, year after year, was the better of the two third basemen and the second best third baseman in the National League, to Eddie Matthews. What do you think? Who do you think was better, Santo or Ken Boyer?
Well, I'm a Ken Boyer fan, but I would say that they're on a par. You could make a case for Boyer had a higher batting average. Of course, he didn't hit in Wrigley Field, but we really like forgetting Santo in was all the sympathy, And it's kind of bad that he died and then they put him in. And right. Santo in there, I like it because I think Boyer should be in there. And one thing about Boyer, he had that signature year in '64 when he was the MVP and the Major League Player of the Year, and he was one of the World Series heroes for the Cardinals. Where Santo had some great years, but they never had a signature moment. His signature moment, unfortunately, is clicking his heels in 1969 when they blew it to the Mets.
With the black
but they're on a par. Boyer and Santo are on a par.
Was the clicking of the heels picture in conjunction with the black cat that was thrown out there, or was Chicago? I don't know. Two very famous pictures, or one picture that depicted both instances. But yes, he clicked his heels, and that didn't turn out so good for the Cubs. That was 1969. Wow, by that time, we were all grown up and looking at the game a little differently. I was already at the Air Force by 1969. Holy Toledo. It goes fast,
that was
gentlemen.
First year of playoffs.
Yes, it was. And it was the Don Clendenin year. It was quite exciting. And ironically, for the first time, I think it was 69, the Yankees hit the basement. And the year the Mets won, which was really incredible, if you stop to think about it. I'll ask you this, Gene, when they were going downhill in those days, the, quote, Horace Clark years that Fritz Peterson writes about so eloquently, and he's got a Facebook page that is priceless with old Yankee pictures and what have you. Did you feel a little something in your heart for the Yankees when they were suffering? Did you feel
No, absolutely not.
Oh.
He just kind of shrugged it off, and I refer to them years as CBS's best sitcom.
It was, and ironically, it predated George Steinbrenner, who put them back on the front page or the back page, because that's where the sports section is in New York. Steinbrenner took over. That fueled your hatred, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, he tried to buy, it'd be different if he was successful in buying his favorite team was the Cleveland Indians growing up. But he couldn't buy them. Somebody beat him out.
There was a long story about that Peter Golenbach talks about. He made some enemies in Cleveland, did Steinbrenner, and he was boxed out of that for a number of reasons. But he spent a lot of money. At first, he wasn't successful, and ironically, they didn't put it together until the first time that he was suspended. And speaking of Cleveland, Gabe Paul came in and basically put the championship together. But George was willing to open his pocketbooks and is looked upon with reverence by Yankee fans for that reason. Robert, do you have memories of George Steinbrenner from that was the prime of when you started watching him?
Yeah, I started watching in the mid to late 80s. And I remember the whole big deal with all the trades that he made from the minor league system.
Right.
Like the Jose Rios and Fred McGriffs.
Do you guys happen to remember the Steinfeld episode where George Costanza, they thought he died. He was with George Steinbrenner. And he comes over to the Costanza's home, and the father goes, "Why did you?" George is dead, and they're thinking. He says, "Why did you trade Jay Buhner? You traded Jay Buhner for Phelps."
My scouts love Phelps.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the great episodes of all time.
Yeah,
so there was never a time, Gene, when you had any sympathy whatsoever for the Yankees, and you got together with your family and you decided to write a book. How did that come about? I'm sure I've asked you this before, but this is your first time on this show on the network. Tell us how that came about and the help you got from your family in putting together the project.
Okay, well, I came home from Barnes & Noble in 2003 complaining about all the Yankee books that were out there. They had Rizzuto, they had DiMaggio, they had Burr, and my son, they've been hearing my stories. My sons were like high school stars, and they heard my stories forever, and my sons are Yankee lovers. So the thing is, they go, "Well, Dad, write your own book." And I told him, okay, if you help me. And I'm at the age where they humor Dad, and he goes, "Okay, I will help you." I go, "You're on." Now, my other son, he's the executive on Wall Street. He went to Columbia Wharton. So he edited it. My other son, I recruited him as a reluctant co-author to keep me from going off on a tangent. And my wife, who hates sports, if you read the book, she hates sports. She typed the whole book because I wrote the whole book in pencil. Well, it's 412 pages in the book, and I wrote the whole thing long-handed, year by year. But the reason I did it was
this is obviously before computers. Would have it been different for you in the process if you had access to the technology that we do today?
I might have wrote it myself on the computer, but my wife could type. Like just sitting there, I'd be sitting at the dining room table like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be, and you didn't have Baseball Reference then either when I did it, so you had to to dig up the stats for everything. But it was I had a lot of fun doing it, and my wife didn't because she hates. It was so comical because my handwriting is not the best, and especially when I was writing the initial years, and it was Stan the Man musical. She typed.
That's beautiful.
But it was good. And my one son, I say he kept it in line. He added some stuff, And my other son is a Wall Street executive. He said, let me edit it. So he edited it, and my wife typed it. Now, as far as ever having a soft spot for the Yankees, unfortunately, my soft spots were when even Mantle died, but especially when I got off the train from work and I put the radio on and I heard that Thurman Munson died. That really got me.
Well, yeah, I heard that on the radio too.
And I felt bad for Mattingly in '95 when Griffey scored all the way. Because it was like his last year, Mattingly, and he had a great playoff. But I felt too bad for Mattingly.
Yeah, bad back.
He had a great playoff.
He had bat at 417.
Yeah. But for me, even though I am the Yankee hater, the biggest one in the whole country, I'm for a big Hall of Fame, and I would vote for Munson, Guidry, and Mattingly for the Hall of Fame.
Whoa. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I interviewed Charlie Silvera back in the 90s.
Swede.
Who was the bullpen catcher in those years from 49 to 53 when Rashi, Lopat, and who was the third one?
Reynolds.
And Reynolds. He said at that they ought to go in, Charlie Silvera said, as a trifecta. And that's basically the same thing you could say for the three guys that you mentioned. All right on the brink, but by Hall of Fame, if you look at what the Hall of Fame is supposed to be about, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have those six guys in there, two trifectas on one level or another. It does open the way. We grew up in an era when we took it for granted. When the World Series was played in New York virtually every year.
Every game was won by a New York team from 1949 to the second game in 1957. Every game was won by a Big Apple team.
Well, and you can take it if you want to say that the 59 Dodgers were a New York team, and it's stretching it a little bit, but then all the way up to 64, from 49 to 64, a New York team plays in it.
Well, to be an American League fan other than the Yankees, 14 out of them 16 years, the Yankees won the pennant.
Right. Which elicits hatred. My hatred came for them in, I guess it was 1960, and I've asked Mert before if he remembers this from when we were down in the schoolyard. I remember the back bench when I heard about it. I remember the Yankees acquire Bud Daly from Kansas City. Now, ironically, he didn't really do much for the Yankees once they got him. But at the time, he was like one of the best lefties
yes, he was.
In the American League, highly touted guy, the best Kansas City had at the time. And yet again, here we go, another player coming over. And I just went, yeah, the expression Gene used, like rooting for U.S. Steel.
Mm-hmm. Well, Greenberg said it's easier to win when you have your farm team in your own league.
Right. And the deal that George Arnold, I think his name was George Arnold, but I know his last name was Arnold.
Right.
He had a sweetheart deal with the Web Topping Consortium. At one time, I think he owned a piece of the Yankees. And I think they were responsible for getting him the deal with Connie Mack that got him out of Philadelphia, which was a lost cause. They had a dilapidated stadium, and they were sharing the city with Philadelphia Phillies, and but I think it was Webb and Topping that set all that up and made Arnold indebted to him when Arnold needed money to keep his fledgling franchise going in Kansas City. He makes some sort of paper deal with the Yankees and throws some bucks in there, and they were a farm team. Easy to hate, Gene. You came by your job. It wasn't a stretch hating them as a fan by any means. I mentioned Vic Raschi. I know that you're a Cardinal fan. Tell me about that trade and how you stood on, how you rooted against Vic Raschi. It was like me and Magley. I rooted for Magley. He was traded to the Dodgers. It was kind of a mind-messing experience, to say it politely.
Well, the thing with Raschi was he was squabble about his contract, and he was getting older. He was 13-6 that year, and he was squabbling about his contract. And the Yankees had a minor leaguer, Bob Grimm, who they were looking to bring up anyway. So before he would get to any other players, George Weiss, the general manager, said, okay, so he got rid of Raschi for squabbling about his contract to the Cardinals. And he was kind of washed up then at the time. But one of the other things about that was my guy, Enos Slaughter, got traded to the Yankees. And that really broke my heart. Country Slaughter.
Yeah.
But Raschi was kind of like on the way out then.
And Slaughter was a guy that got involved with the back and forth from the Yankees to Kansas City trip. I think he went back and forth a few times. The Bob Grimm that you mentioned was in on those trades a number of times. Johnny Cooks, Ralph Terry, Hector Lopez, naturally Roger Maris and Hank Bauer. The list goes on and on. Ken Boyer, or Clete Boyer, was originally a Kansas City guy, if I'm not mistaken. Clete, Cloyd, and Ken were one of like 9 professional ball players to come out of the Boyer family from a little town, Alba, Missouri.
And they played against the Mantle brothers.
Really? Back then? Whoa.
Yeah. Mantle and Boyer were about the same age. Ken Boyer.
Whoa. Good memories, gentlemen. Hey,
Floyd Boyer was the first to get banned in the Bronx. He was the first player to have the book Banned in the Bronx. I called him up. Cloyd Boyer. I called him up. I got his phone. He goes, "What are you calling about?" And I explained to him about the book because there's a sub-agenda about, how great Ken Boyer was, should be in the Hall of Fame and so forth. So we talked about a half hour, me and Cloyd Boyer. He was the first player to actually have a copy.
Wow. He was a pitcher with the Cardinals, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, mediocre. He was a long-time Atlanta Braves pitching coach. A real long time.
Know that.
Before they got the rocker. Before they have the one who had Smoltz and all of them.
Yes. Can't think of his name right now, but he'd ride back and forth with Bobby Cox.
And the ironic thing was then he ended up getting John Rocker, right?
Yeah.
and the one player that he could not talk to was, because he was out to lunch.
Right. And a racist, too. Wasn't he the guy that made races?
Oh, yeah. He was on a New York subway that time. Yeah, he was on a New York subway, and he was downgraded. He was just out to lunch.
Oh, that was the 7 train, as I remember that.
Yeah.
That was the train Mert and I took to Shea, down Roosevelt, which incidentally is a very cute statement that Howie Rose uses, the radio announcer, fastball right down Roosevelt. I think picked
we used to take the GG. You ever heard the GG train? We used to take the GG train to Queens Plaza and take the D train to 155th or 161st Street. from Greenpoint.
Well, yes, the D train
from Greenpoint.
went all the way up to the end of Bronx, went up to Tremont and Fordham Road and Kingsbridge, where my grandparents lived, up in the Bronx. And you came in the other way. Did you guys drive in to New York from Jersey at all?
Well, I went over my cousins in Greenpoint. Like when the Cardinals came in the summer, I went over there for 3 days. We went to all the games. And then we used to go to Manny's. Did you ever go to Manny's? They used to have all the memorabilia, yearbooks, and so forth.
Yes, right outside of the
Manny's,
stadium.
Yeah.
Get a lot of the books and games and caps and what have you there.
And there was a restaurant. The Sportsman restaurant was close by.
I don't remember that.
It
was a destination for us where we come and go. You know, the neighborhood was kind of going downhill a little bit. Certainly up where the Giants were up in Harlem.
155th.
Yeah.
We used to go to the old timers game. You mentioned old timers games in the 50s. My mother was a real North Bears fan because her neighbor was Hank Baroe, who was the hero for the 1945 Cubs, and he was 10-5 with the Yankees in 1945 in the midseason, and they traded him to the Cubs, and he was 11-2, became the National League Pitcher of the Year, and was the last Cub to win a World Series game up until last year. And so that was my mother's close neighbor. And when they traded her neighbor, she stopped being a Yankee fan, but she still liked seeing the North Bears guys because my mother was a sports fan. She was kind of a maverick woman of the 1930s, and she used to go to the North Bears games all the time, who were considered the second best team in baseball, never mind just the minors, because the people were getting stockpiled there. And it was like Twinkle Toes Selkirk, Joe Gordon. My mother used to love to see the old timers. She used to see when they played for the North Bears.
Wow, very cool.
So we used to go to a lot of the old timers games.
I'll give you what you mentioned, a mother recollection. I'll recollect my mom. Marty remembers her. She was at the 1939 game that Lou Gehrig gave his famous speech at.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was 19 years old, and my grandfather got some tickets from they were up in Mount Kisco, and she got on a train with a friend of hers, and they went down and saw that. And she told me that story in 1956 when I got home from school for the last few games of the Don Lawson perfect game. And we're sitting in the living room, and she told me that story. I felt pretty close to it that day. That was pretty cool. And but was I a Yankee fan even then when I heard that? No, not really. But boy, worshiping them, and just going to games. I'll ask you if you have memories of the voice of the Yankees, not Mel Allen, but the public address announcer. Good afternoon, and welcome to Yankee Stadium. Now batting number 7, Mickey Mantle. Number 7. Bob Shepard, yeah. Remember that, Mert?
Absolutely, yeah.
Was that somewhat right on?
He was great. That was very good, yeah.
Oh, all right, because of course, from knowing me all these years, that is my only talent. I am known as an idiot non-savant. You just heard it, the voice of the Yankees, Bob Shepard. It was almost like the voice of God. They nicknamed the public address announcer in Oakland the voice of God. But Shepard would come on, and invariably, do you remember, Mert and Gene, the second game of a doubleheader, we'd wait for the lineups to come up before going, because in the second game, instead of Mantle in center field, it would always, even when he was healthy, they wouldn't play him in a doubleheader. it was always Norm Seaburn playing center field in the second game. And I remember that how anticlimactic. You knew it was coming, and you'd wait maybe 10, 15 minutes after, and they'd put it up there, and there was the air would almost go out of the stadium when they, and he got an unfair rap. He lost the ball in the sun. He was deemed a defensive liability. He and Lumpy went to, and Gene must have loved this one. It was one of the trades for Slaughter, I think, when he and Lumpy went to Kansas City, and those two guys really helped make them. I say decent. They were never good teams. I think
he was more of a first baseman, wasn't he, Seaburn?
Yeah, Seaburn, and they helped.
His power was to left to right center, not down the 296 line. As his lefty batter, his power was to the gap, and he didn't, it would just be a long fly out.
Yeah, did not take advantage of that. Sure, and there was a World Series or a playoff.
Yeah, he dropped a few balls.
Yeah,
maybe against the
Now,
Braves.
I'll ask you one other thing, guys, because it was his birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I posted something. I posted this picture. Hector, what a pair of hands, Lopez.
Yeah, right.
He was a pretty good ball player.
A bad rap. Solid. He went wild in the '61 World Series.
Yeah.
When Mantle couldn't play.
Right.
He was a decent hitter. He was a pretty good hitter, but he wasn't the greatest fielder. I mean, that's based on the nickname you just used.
Yeah, but I think the nickname contributed to the image more, and he was versatile. He played a little third. He got a bad rap because he wasn't going to be Clete Boyer playing third.
No.
I think if Hector Lopez played like in Fenway, he would have probably been a 25 to 35 homer guy.
Very possible.
Right-handed batters never fared well at Yankee Stadium, unless you were Moose Gowan and could hit the ball at the right field stands. I don't think they had any batters really true to history that were really power hitters.
Right. I'll ask you guys this. What if the trade that was allegedly made by Yawkey and I guess it was McPhail, if had control, they were going to trade DiMaggio for
Williams.
And that it would have reunited Dom DiMaggio with his brother. And who would have played center field? Dom or his brother?
Joe would have played it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, it would have helped both their careers, that's for sure, as far as number of home runs. Jeez.
DiMaggio hit 46 homers in 1 year. Is it conceivable that he hit 14 that were like either doubles, triples, or long outs in the Grand Canyon?
No.
Would have given him 60?
Yeah. Wow.
Probably.
DiMaggio, 60. Wasn't really known as a home run hitter because of the dimensions of that park.
Had
Here's
a lot of
DiMaggio's stat. Hit more home runs than struck out in his career?
Almost.
Yeah, he hardly
okay.
ever.
He won 369.
Okay.
Close enough.
Close enough. They have guys striking out today with regularity more than 200 times a year. It's a changing game.
You didn't have everybody throwing 90 then either.
That's true. That is true, but there's the thing, you could throw it as fast as you want, but if it comes in on a straight line, a big league hitter's gonna hit it. And I think that's what's really basically wrong with pitching, is that they've lost track of the idea of pitching is the art of deception, and they put too much priority on the miles per hour of the ball and not enough priority of what the effects of the off-speed pitch is and the difference in velocity between the off-speed pitch and the power pitch. That could be what makes it easier in today's day and age. Also could be the ball. We've never spoken about this, guys, on this show. The ball might just be juiced today. Baseball might be looking at it and say, hey, all these home runs.
Yeah, they got the Barry Bonds needle. They're putting a little juice in it.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying it's wound tighter, you know.
Well, they keep on saying that they're studying it. But, it ain't going to stop Aaron Judge, although he did get robbed a few times on some great catches.
Yeah. But it's more than just that, though. It's the bats are made of harder wood. They were, I believe, checking out the surface of the bats, like you just said. Yeah, the maple bats are harder than the ash bats used to be. And the ballparks are smaller, the guys are bigger. And then
that doesn't make sense.
Another thing with the ball this year, they're saying that the seams are lower, so the pitchers aren't getting the best break on the ball because the seams are lower. And, I think guys are gripping the ball hard. You're seeing more blisters than you ever saw before. So there's something to this, definitely, with the ball, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think
they will deny it. They will deny it.
Yeah. The new stat is exit velocity, and that turns people on. 117 miles an hour exit velocity to 109 mile an hour fastball, this and that. It sells, and as we know, we've talked about recently with Tim Tebow, it's an entertainment business. Can we take a second and update? How's Tebow doing this week? Robert, anything?
He's batting .308 in his last 24, and he hit his fourth home run for Port St. Lucie.
Right.
A
higher A team than he had been playing with, and as with a lot of players, the further up the line they go, the better they become. A lot of batters, the better they become, because pitchers are around the plate more, and the better the pitching, the batters adjust. So I'm gonna say, and I was one that thought it was just a dog and pony show, that there's no chance. I was in some ways just quoting Sandy Alderson, who a couple of days before he really started getting hot, basically wrote him off, basically said it is entertainment. So I'm not the only one that's jumping on the bandwagon late, but God bless him. No pun intended. Let him go for it.
Sure.
And God knows it would be an infusion. Bring him up at the end of the year. Maybe Mert mentioned the possibility of that on
why not? If there's nothing else going on and the stands are empty, why not?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Rosario, he was hurt this week. Not hurt, but hospitalized, some sort of stomach ailment.
Had some kind of stomach virus or something like that.
Yeah, I hope he's going to be okay, and I hope that doesn't end up weakening him, holding him back down the stretch, so that it looks like his numbers are falling off, and it would be a reason not to bring him up. But I'm damn anxious to see how he's doing and what he looks like in a major league uniform.
Well, I think the only way they bring him up is if they trade, Cabrera or somebody else. Looks like they're going to trade Cabrera.
That's a good possibility. Cabrera, they are putting him at third, giving him the appearance of having some versatility. I think that's what it's for. Somebody will pick him up and use him, and he'll probably be a spark. Although I can't see him having anything much left. Let's put it that way. We'll see. Anything with the Yankees this week, Robert and Gene? Maybe you're following it. Anything you want to add about the 2017 season?
We got to wait for the trade deadline. Maybe Verlander.
Whoa. I mentioned last week.
They got to be looking for somebody like that.
They have to.
Sonny Gray of the A's would seem like a natural. You take Alonso and Sonny Gray and put them in a package, and we'll see what happens from that front. Because the A's are definitely sellers. They're reaching a point where if they could put together a farm system again, and they've done this 4 or 5 times in the last 10 years, they'll get good, rebuild, get good, rebuild. They're about to get a ballpark. The final destination will be announced, or the final place they're going to put it will be announced by the end of the year, and they'll be a force in the American League once again, because they've got something called brain power, and Billy Beane is kind of an offshoot of Sandy Alderson, and they just have a way of doing things that you can't look back. You can't not grant them the respect. And I still think there's a very, very remote possibility, and that's only because I'm such a fan that I'm saying this with my heart, that could they make a run for it for a wild card, or is it an absolutely no-no, Marty?
The Mets?
All right, never mind.
I really don't think so, Ralph.
That's like right up there with playoffs.
I don't think so. Somebody mentioned something the other day on the radio that says if you are less games behind than there are weeks left of the season, you still have a chance, because maybe you can make up 1 game a week, but you probably can't make up more than that. So, if they're like 9 games out of a spot, and maybe there is around 9 weeks left of the season, so maybe
right.
you can't close the door 100%, but realistically, I don't think they're in it. And Wheeler's back on the
with
DL,
that number that you quote, that's an excellent way of looking at it. That's
I had not heard that before.
Neither have I in all those years, and but they qualify from that standpoint.
Just barely.
Barely. Not to catch Washington. Let's put it under any circumstances. No. But although Washington has such a lousy bullpen, they may be dealing with the A's as well. They didn't. The A's dealt.
Is Britton available?
Pardon?
Is Britton available from the Orioles?
Don't know about that. That they could be throwing in the towel. That's very interesting.
And I'm not a Dusty Baker fan with his managing, so.
No, I'm a Dusty Baker fan with his managing position players. He's great. But pitching staff, whoa. From the time he flipped the ball in
the Ortiz?
2000, right, in the World Series, and then Spiezio comes up and says, not so fast, Mr. Baker, not so fast. Hey, guys, we're coming to the end. Thank you. This has been terrific, Gene.
My pleasure.
You come back, you're welcome on any of these shows at any time. Always enjoy having you. Robert, Marty, I enjoy keeping up with the Yankees and Mets with you on Facebook during the week. We send messages back and forth, and basically we can see how the next week's program, what we're going to do. We always write show fodder, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. It's a fun way to go through the season. I'm enjoying this, and we'll do it next week. I implore you all to keep on keeping on. Thanks again, Gene, Robert, and Marty. See you next week, everybody.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Adios.